Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Unfound live show for February 10th of 2025. How is everybody doing? Did you watch the Super Bowl yesterday? We'll get into that in a moment. How's the weather where you are? It has been good here, but it has been foggy. This is easily the most fog I have seen here. I know I've talked about this before, but the most fog that I've seen in this area since I moved here. It even got a little murky out there today. Well, the funny part is that when I went to a concert on Saturday night with my brother Brian, it would have been pretty cool if it was foggy because the venue's right there on the water. If it had been foggy that night for that concert, that would have been pretty cool, but it wasn't foggy, so go figure. I have a spectacular show lined up for you tonight. You can see there in the title of this live show, we got another plane crash to talk about. In fact, there was another one today in Arizona, but I'm going to stick to this one that occurred in Alaska some days ago. I want to talk about a missing persons group that has been put together in the state of Ohio. And I think I told you last week that I got a letter from Steve, Steve Panky, but I had not opened it before the live show. So I couldn't read it. Well, I am going to read or cover parts of it tonight, some things that you might find interesting that he said in there. And of course, I have a lot of other stuff to fill up the next 2 hours. As I've said since day one, as you are watching tonight, please give this video a thumbs up. Please like it, share it. If you'd like to support what we do here at Unfound, you're going to go to patreon.com/Unfound podcast. I'd appreciate that. Or you can go to paypal.me/Unfound podcast. Or you can do what Frida already did tonight, and that is become a new member of the YouTube channel. You can see Frida is there in green. You can be in green too. All you have to do is hit the join button below where, if you're watching on YouTube, that is, you can watch this on Facebook as well. But if you're on YouTube, you can hit the join button below and support Unfound that way. And one more other way is the super chat button. You can only do that when the show is live, like it is right now. And that's down at the bottom underneath the chat. So where do I want to start tonight? I'm going to get this out of the way. I really don't want to spend a ton of time. In fact, I have my weekly therapy session for my sleeping Monday morning. That's been going on. We did, what was this, session 5 this morning at 8 a.m. And one of the promises, one of the suggestions, if not orders, that my therapist gave me this morning was I'm not to do any reading or researching or listening to any podcasts that have anything to do with insomnia, with anything regarding what's been going on with me for the last 2 months. She thinks that's going to help me mentally, and so I'm not allowed to talk about it really either. And that is something that they say it's hard for me to do because that's really not my nature. I like to, that's why I do this podcast. I like to dig into things. So I'm going to follow what she says. But if all of you are wondering, it was kind of a little bit of a rough week with my sleep. I would say I had, what would we say? We had 7. I had 3 good nights, although they were not together. And then I had 2 mezza nights. And then I had one night that was below average. And then one night that was really, really, really below average. But the good news is that the best night was last night. And for the first time since December, I actually slept 6 hours. So that was really nice. And I could tell. And even though I still got the sleepies this afternoon and everything, that's the first time that I haven't slept for over 6 hours or over since I was up seeing my dad. And that was only because I was in bed for like 9. I was like in bed for 9 hours to get 6 hours of sleep. Whereas last night, I was in bed for 6.5 hours and I got 6 hours of sleep, which is much more along the way normal people sleep. So I'm not guaranteeing anything tonight or anything, but it was, my body wants to sleep in that way. I'm very different, I think, from a lot of insomniacs out there who can't sleep. My issue is that I can sleep. It's just that my body wants to sleep a little bit at night, a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the afternoon, a little bit in the evening. And I have to try to get this all back together. And I think that I'm doing it, but I'm still very sleep deprived. So that's all I want to say about that. So let's move on. Maybe I should say this to be helpful to anybody. Because I not only do I want to recover, but if there are people out there like myself, I'm going to give you one tip. If you have insomnia, I'm going to give you this one tip. If you have a bad night, do not try to make it up the next night. Meaning, if you have a night where you sleep for only 3 hours, do not, I cannot stress this heavily enough, do not go to bed early the next night and trying to get the hours that you missed back. Do not do that. You set up your sleep schedule, whatever it may be, 11 to 7, 10 to 6, whatever your regular schedule is, and you stick to it. And you don't go to bed a minute before 10, a minute. It doesn't matter how many hours you got to sleep or not sleep the night before. It's one of the biggest mistakes people make. It's one of the mistakes I made that only makes your insomnia worse. Believe it or not. It's scientifically proven. All right. Let's move on. I went to see Alice Cooper on Saturday night, and it was fantastic. I'm not going to get into the whole story. I've already done the story. If you want to see the story of me getting to the venue with my brother Brian, that is a story in and of itself that could have been a movie. But it was kind of a last minute thing. I had wanted to go. I knew Alice Cooper was coming to town. Not the biggest fan of his music. He has some good tunes, but I do like him as a person. I think he's a really good guy, a cool guy. He had some troubles early in his career with drugs and alcohol, and he's cleaned himself up. He's been married to the same woman, even though he's a rock and roller for like almost 50 years. And he's actually, she's still in his show. And I've seen interviews with him and everything. So I wanted to go see him, but my buddy Dana had something to do on Saturday night. So I'm like the beginning of last week, I guess I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go by myself. But then when I showed up at trivia on Wednesday evening, my brother Brian brought it up. You see Alice Cooper's in town. I said, yeah, you want to go? He said, absolutely, because he's not seen him either, even though my brother, who's 20 years older, or not quite, but almost 20 years older than I am. Of course, Alice Cooper was in his heyday when my brother Brian was like just turning 20, in that age, and he never got to see him. My brother Michael went to see Alice Cooper back in the early 70s, but brother Brian never got to see him, and he always regretted it. And so when he brought it up at Trivium, said, yeah, let's go. So he came down, and I'm not getting into the whole story, but it was over here at the Sound right there in Clearwater. I can see the venue from my building over by the elevators. I'm over on the balcony by the elevators. And if I look up toward Clearwater, that's where the venue is. It was, it's right there on the water. It was a fantastic show. I would put, as some of you know, I've seen a lot of concerts over the last 5 years. I've kind of gotten into that. That is one of my fun times that I like to go. And I've seen a lot of bands that I wish I would have seen back in their heydays, like Def Leppard or whoever. But I got to tell you, this concert was probably in my top 5 all time. Probably. Now, granted, you don't go to Alice Cooper for the singing. The musicians were fantastic. And he's singing. He's in key, but the songs are not that dynamic or anything. That's really not, what everybody knows Alice Cooper for. It's the stage presence. It's the show. It's the theatrics. It's kind of a little, it's kind of like a little bit of goth rock. And he's going to bring a guillotine out on stage, and he's going to, have swords stabbing people, of course, faking everything. That's the kind of show you're going to see when you're going to see Alice Cooper. And it was fantastic. I'm not really necessarily into that. I like, maybe prefer just a straightforward rock show. But being that he's the king, he's at least started it. And he's still doing it. He just turned 77 years old. It was fantastic. And my brother and I got there just in time to when it started. We got there like 5 minutes before it started. The venue is really nice. It was perfect temperature out there. Like I said, if it had been foggy out, that would have been really cool. But perfect temperature, no problems parking, and Brother Brian loved it. I loved it. I'm so glad that he brought it up at trivia. Or it might have been one of those things where he wanted to go and didn't say anything. I wanted to go. I didn't say anything. And then it would have been afterwards. Oh, Alice Cooper was here, and he would have said, oh, I wanted to go, and we would have missed it. So I'm happy that he brought it up. And, if you're into that kind of thing, I would certainly recommend Alice Cooper to you. Absolutely. And the tickets were very reasonable. At least they were reasonable here in Clearwater. And so good. It was so good. And he did a ton. It was like there was no opening act. It was just him and his band. And they did a ton of songs. A ton of songs. It was like a 2-hour show. It started like 7:45. And it was like 9, I think maybe it was like 9:40 when Brian and I got back to the car. So maybe an hour and 45-minute show, something like that, from a 77-year-old. Of course, all his other musicians are quite a bit younger, but it was fantastic. And if you're friends with me on Facebook, I did take a few videos. You could check them out there. All right, moving on. Super Bowl, watched it. I was happy that the Chiefs didn't win. I really necessarily wasn't rooting for either team. I really don't care about the Eagles either, but I really didn't want to have the Chiefs win 3 in a row. So maybe it's just because I'm a Steelers fan. And of course, they won 2 in a row twice. So maybe that had something to do with it. But I watched it. Of course, the Chiefs got blown out. I'm not surprised that they lost. I'm not surprised that they got blown out. The fact is, the Chiefs, even though they had a spectacular record, they won quite a few games just by like one score, like by a field goal, 4 points, 5 points. So a lot of those games could have easily gone the opposite direction. So we have to keep that in mind. And that was something that was in my mind, thinking about who was going to win. It just seemed to me that the Eagles were the more dominant team going in. with Saquon Barkley and everything. And that, of course, proved to be the case. Patrick Mahomes played probably one of his worst games of his entire career. What are you going to do? A couple interceptions, one return for a touchdown. But it was not that interesting of a Super Bowl. Of course, there wasn't any intrigue. It wasn't not a lot of drama or anything because it was 24-0 at halftime or something. And what it ended up being 40-22. And it really, of course, wasn't even that close. Not even, those couple touchdowns that the Chiefs got at the end really, those are just like kind of Eagles just gave it to them. So Eagles have their second Super Bowl win. My Uncle Russ, who died like 20 years ago, he had Eagles season tickets for, 30 years or something like that. Did get to see them go to a Super Bowl where they lost to the Raiders. So he never, he's been dead for 20 years, never got to see them win. So wherever he is, I hope he's smiling that his Eagles now won a Super Bowl for the second time. As far as the halftime show goes, I saw a lot of people of my age, maybe even a little bit younger, and of course older, really complaining about the halftime show and Kendrick Lamar and what was that, and is that music and everything else. I'm not into that. I mean, I like rap music. I'm a going back to when I was younger, and I still listen to the Beastie Boys once in a while. I don't mind NWA. I don't mind Public Enemy or Run DMC and Sugar Hill Gang. And I know a lot of those tunes, more than probably any of you would ever realize. But I'm 54 years old. I just try to remember I'm not in the demographic. And for the NFL, you have to keep in mind something when it comes to sports, at least in the United States, the way they are marketed. If you're like over 40 years old or over 35 years old, you are not in the marketing demographic. I've been out of the demographic for almost 20 years now. That doesn't mean older people don't watch football or basketball or whatever else. But the marketing is toward young people. They're trying to rope those kids in so they become lifelong fans, or maybe they eventually get season tickets and everything else. In addition, it's younger people who are more likely to buy all the merchandise and everything else. Not people who, are now have kids that are in their teens or, are on the verge of retiring and they're starting to manage their budgets and all. Of course, the sports leagues want those people to watch. But when it comes to marketing, if you're over like 35, 40 years old, you're out. This is not geared at you anymore. They want you to enjoy it, but that is it. So when it comes to Kendrick Lamar, I don't want to get into this thing where I'm complaining about it. I watched it. It was interesting. Even though I'm into some hip hop and rap music or whatever, really not my cup of tea. And even with like Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre from a couple years ago, that was okay too. I don't mind them. They were popular. They became popular when I was late teens, early 20s. And I can remember them being on MTV and Gin and Juice and all of that. But, just wasn't really my cup of tea either. But it's not geared at me. And people have to remember that. I see all of these Gen Xers not understanding this. And if you want to say, are there other musicians, performers, bands out there who are more popular than Kendrick Lamar? The answer is yes. Who've been around for a long time. I mean, if you want to put somebody up there on stage that everybody knows, you just go get the Rolling Stones. Of course, they did a Super Bowl. Actually, did the one in Detroit where the Steelers beat Seattle. You can do that, but that's not what the NFL is trying to do here. So you just have to keep that in mind. And you show your age when you start complaining about these things. You have to understand what's going on. Even when we go, people say, what about Prince? Look how good he was. Yeah, but the difference is this. You know how long ago Prince did the halftime show for Super Bowl? 17 years ago. 18 years ago. Yeah, it was 2000. Was it? It wasn't. Yeah, it was like 2007. Yeah, that's right. So it's like 17, 18 years ago. And all of you, we were all much younger and we were still kind of in that demographic, and Prince was still putting out music and everything else. If Prince were still alive, could he still go and done the halftime show now? Maybe. Just depends on how popular he would have stayed. But we have to remember that was 17, 18 years ago. So, I realize a lot of people watch it and they're like, well, where's the band? Where's the music? It's just the guy with a microphone. This is all recorded music and everything. That's what a lot of the music industry is right now. I mean, you didn't think that, didn't think you were going to see a 20-piece band out there with a horn section and everything. Did you? So I just kind of laugh when I see people complaining about it. I realize it's not people's cup of tea. But if they were going to get a musician or a group that was going to be known by everybody, they just put like the Rolling Stones or somebody like that up every year. I mean, what are we doing here? And I'm a Rolling Stones fan, even though I've never seen them in live anyway. In fact, I have a Rolling Stones poster up in my condo here. So we just have to keep that in mind. What else is going on? Of course, we had Groundhog Day. I don't have time to get into my story. It's already been like over a week since Groundhog Day. I have it here on my list of things that maybe I want to talk about, but I'm just going to skip that. If you want to hear my Groundhog Day story from 1997, you can go back and try to find one of the old live shows that came out right around Groundhog Day, the past few years. So those are some of the things that I wanted to talk about. Oh, my trivia team, being that I mentioned trivia a few minutes ago, we came in second. Or no, we came in fourth or something. We had a horrible night. You're like, well, you came in fourth. Yeah, that's a horrible night for us. So we've dropped back down to second place overall with like 6 or 7 weeks to go, but it's very tight. It's like us and another team, and we've already pulled away from all of the other teams. So the first 4 weeks of this season has been we won, they won, we won, they won. And so we're going, back and forth. It's very competitive. We'll see how long it stays that way. And then one other thing before we move into the topics for tonight. Maybe I've mentioned this once in a while. I'm in an NFL Pick'em League. It's called Hood Ball. And one of my brother's neighbors, his name is Sheldon. He runs it. He runs this league. So we pick games every week. It's just straight up, no points or anything like this. Straight up picking the teams who's going to win every week, starting all what it is now 18 weeks of the NFL season. We don't do the playoffs or the Super Bowl. 32 competitors this year. I came in tied for second. And coincidentally, I tied with my sister-in-law, my brother Brian's wife, Laureen, if you can believe it. What are the odds of that? Brother did not finish well this year. But we were in second place. The woman who won was 2 games, 2 wins, 2 good picks ahead of us. Very, very competitive. All of those games, all of those weeks. and we were that close at the end. She beat us by 2 games. So she picked one game better than us every 9 weeks. Like one game half of the season, the other half. That's all. I mean, so competitive. But the thing is, I got $160 out of it. Everybody puts $20 in. The winner, she won $320. And then Laureen and I split the other $320. So that was pretty cool. So I became $160 richer yesterday. And I actually went over and picked the money up today. You know me, I love to win. And in the years that I've been playing, so I started playing, I think I've played every year since 2012, since I moved here. They run it every year. So that's 13 seasons. I've actually won the league twice. And then this year I came in second. I've had some other pretty good finishes as well, but this is my first second place. So I'm one of the few people who has won twice and then getting a second and finishing in the money. That's all pretty good. And I really wasn't sure where I was going to finish. I have to admit, it was a little bit of a pleasant surprise. So let's see who is in here now that I've been talking for 26 minutes. Hello, Frida. Thank you so much. You are very generous, Frida. Thank you for joining the YouTube channel as a member. Charlie, what's going on? You're hearing about some family news, I guess, here. Karen and Lisa, not feeling so good. Sorry to hear that. Amy, hello, Charles again. Joanne, CR, Neighborly. Hello, Sarah. How are you? Missing Christopher Douthit. Good to see you. Mary, how are you doing tonight? Good to see you in the chat. Says hoping sleeping well again. Yeah. It's going to take some time. The band, oh my goodness, I finally caught the live. I've been listening to podcasts for years. Well, thank you, Bandit. How are you? Thanks for joining in tonight. First timer. Lisa says there's an ice cream shop where she lives named Alice Scoopers. I love that. Yeah, Charlie, if you have a chance to go see Alice Cooper, I would do so. Hello, Deborah, CR. Rockford, the 1980 Super Bowl, Raiders over Eagles was glamorous, and my very first vivid sports memory, 8-year-old me wore my Plunkett number 16 jersey for about a month. Yeah, you are a no-cal, so-cal person, Rockford. I got to ask you a question, Rockford. Does Jim Plunkett deserve to be in the NFL Hall of Fame, being that he won 2 Super Bowls? Does he belong there? Mary Jane, good to see you. And Cranky just getting in here 28 minutes in. What's going on? Good to see you, Cranky99. Hope you are doing well. All right, so let's go to the topics for tonight. And if you're wondering what's up with my hair, it's a little drier now, but when I started a half hour ago, yeah, I wanted to take a shower, got doing some things, and then it was like 7:45, and I'm like, oh man, this is not good. I got to go take a shower. And really, it takes my hair just naturally about an hour and a half to 2 hours to dry. So if you're wondering, well, Ed's hair looks a little different. It looks, yeah, when I came on the camera tonight, I had a little bit of the wet dog look going on. So I apologize. So, of course, this past Friday, we continue on our hiatus episodes, and I continue to make no guarantee about when a new episode will be out. I can tell you that as long as my sleep continues to improve, that will make the new episodes come out sooner. That's all I can tell you. But we had Jeff Nichols, first time replaying that interview, going way back to early 2017, so 8 years ago. I don't know where the time goes. I think his sister did a fantastic job. And, of course, Jeff's disappearance, in my estimation, is, an excellent, unfortunately, an excellent example of the art of luring. There's no doubt with the using the golf clubs, which surely did not exist, that his ex-wife got him to do something he normally wouldn't do. But she knew him, knew him well enough to know that, I say I have some golf clubs for him. I can get him practically to do anything. And even though Jeff had certainly been screwed over by his wife and her family, he still showed up there. That's why we have to be very careful. All of us, not just people who are married or ex-wives, ex-husbands, but we have to be very careful when people who we really normally do not trust start doing nice things for us. We cannot be blinded by golf clubs or like Tyler North. Of course, that's how he ended up deceased, got lured. He had been having sex with his ex-wife. Of course, was being lured with sex, with money, with golf clubs, with drugs. This can't happen. This can't happen. And my estimation, that is Jeff, even though she says he didn't show up, he surely did show up, and something happened. And it was surely was planned. Now, of course, the problem is, well, then where is Jeff? I couldn't even begin to guess, really. It's a tough question. Given that I happen to believe that this was planned, I have to believe that they had that all figured out beforehand, which means it might be even tougher than usual to figure out where Jeff's remains could be. And of course, it's now been like 20 years. So it's a tough one. It's very sad. It's one of those situations for all the good men and women out there. This is what happens when you end up hooking up with the wrong person. This is what can happen. And even so, as we've learned on Unfound, because relationships are so unpredictable, you can certainly end up getting into a relationship with a fantastic person, but that doesn't mean that person is going to be fantastic 10 years or 20 years down the road. So it's tough. That's why relationships are the number one cause of disappearances. And Jeff Nichols, I think, is a perfect example of that. But you always have to be very, very careful. And unfortunately, that means, being a bit cynical and a little bit paranoid and everything. But I think that's part of the safety system that our brains have created for us. So, and the other thing I was thinking about Jeff Nichols, we've featured, the widest range of people on Unfound, because I don't plan who I'm going to interview. We reach out to a bunch of people and then they get back to us. And so it's not like I'm looking for particular types of disappearances or anything, or particular types of people. I'm not focusing like on minorities or women or children. I just do a little bit of everything. Although children, I've already talked about that. I try to stay away from child disappearances, depending. But I was thinking about Jeff. Jeff has to be seemingly one of the best, nicest people who we've ever featured on Unfound. We've featured quite a few addicts and felons, and of course, just last week it was Donnie Smatlack, who was a drug dealer, and everything else. But on the opposite side of that bell curve, we have a guy like Jeff Nichols, who, it's very sad, very, very sad. So like I said, I don't know how that disappearance is going to be solved. I can make it doesn't mean it won't be, but I just can't make any predictions on how that is going to happen outside of luck, because His ex-wife and her family continue. They're in Ireland, and they're, of course, you heard the story that she came back, went to jail for a little bit, and went right back to Ireland, and that was that. So I don't know how that disappearance is going to get solved. Going back to Rockford, honestly, no. Jim Plunkett, that's a no. Kills me to say that, but he only had 4 or 5 good seasons. But what seasons they were. All right, so Rockford, even being a Raiders fan, says that Jim Plunkett does not deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. It's probably one of the most controversial or questionable ones that people really talk about. I think Rockford, he's the only 2-time Super Bowl winning quarterback who's not in the Hall, of course, except for like Patrick Holmes, who is still playing, and Ben Roethlisberger, who is not eligible yet. He's the only one 2 Super Bowl win quarterback who's not in the Hall. So I think that's why his name comes up once in a while. All right, moving on to some other things. Of course, yesterday was the 21st anniversary. Hello, D. How are you? What's going on, D? And Amy says Vern is suspicious too regarding Jeff Nichols' disappearance. And hello, Stephanie. How are you? Good to see you tonight. Once again, hello, D. How are you? But 21 years ago yesterday, Mara Murray went missing. And just to talk about that for a few minutes, one of the first questions I ever put to all of you way back in 2016. And even though we've covered 360 disappearances, I think we're still continuing to try to answer this question in a concrete way. And that would be, why are some disappearances really, really well known, and why are most not well known? What makes Mara Murray's disappearance and all the attention that has gotten, why is it? And all of these others haven't. Because I think what we've learned, in covering 360 disappearances, when it comes to the actual person and circumstances, I don't know if Mara's disappearances, it's not unique. She wasn't that unique. The circumstances really aren't that unique. We have to remember, people wrecking their cars and running off is what I believe happened. That happens all the time. Now, of course, most of those people don't go missing. But people who drink and drive, if they wreck, a lot of them are prone to run off. And I think once in a while, we have to be open to the idea that in running off, something is going to happen. They're going to stumble in the woods, hit their head, and die right there. Or they're suddenly feeling suicidal and they're going to jump off a nearby bridge into a river or something. We have to realize these are all possibilities. So she nor her circumstances are that unique. But still, one of the best known disappearances of your regular person in the United States, at least here in the 21st century. So why? And I have it here, because it's not like her disappearance is as unique as Dale Kerstetter's, or it's not like Flight 370, and it's not like Mary Jane Van Gilder. So my insight, I think where I am on this, it's a combination of things that I think that has made Mara Murray's disappearance, what it has become. Now, of course, it helped or didn't help, depending on how you look at it. We had, some people with questionable ethics who have devoted a lot of time to her disappearance, maybe for their own glory. But here's what I would say as the residing expert of Unfound and this live show and everything else. I got to admit, One of the reasons I think that it's got a lot of attention is her looks. You could also say that maybe about Jennifer Kesse. You could also say that about some of the disappearances that we've covered on Unfound. This goes both ways, both men and women. But I think Mara Murray's looks plays a factor. I think another big thing is, it wasn't like she wrecked just like right down the street from UMass. There's still this big question. What was she doing in New Hampshire and where she was going? Where was she going? Nobody knows. She did all these searches and everything, but there's no clue. There's no proof that she was headed to any of those places that she researched. So I think that needs to be thrown in there. I think all of the items in the days and weeks before her disappearance, I think that adds up to something. Once again, it's not any one of these things. It's all of this stuff put together. And what I mean is, the credit card fraud that she did. Of course, she wrecked a car. And of course, now we know she wrecked 2 cars within like a week of each other, or whatever it was. I think it was because there were those boxes in the room. And of course, when her sister was on, Jolie said, she wasn't moving out. Those boxes were there because she was just moving back in. I think that has a lot to do with all this stuff that was became public knowledge about the days before she went missing. I think that also her being seen after the wreck by the bus driver. And then also, I just think that the way, at least early on, the family handled this, and in particular, maybe her father. Once again, as the guy who talks to all of the guests and has gotten to know so many family members and everything, my insight is that Fred Murray just acted a little differently than most family members' fathers out there. And I think that adds into it as well. Maybe just being more standoffish with the media and everything else. I think it all adds up. It's not any one of those topics that I just went through that has made Mara Murray's disappearance so well known. I think it's all of it put together. And I think if we were to look at a lot of other disappearances, like we might say Brian Schaefer's, it's not just one thing. It's not just that he's not seen on the video that night. It's not just that. It's the death of his mother. It's, the way his friends act, the people who were there that night. It's, that. It's that he was, supposed to be going on this trip with this, this woman that was in his life, and he went missing right before that. It was the rumors out there that he was actually gay or bisexual or something. Well, even with Brian Schaefer, it's more than just the video. And we could say that about Jennifer Kesse. It's more than just seeing the video of somebody dumping her car and walking off. That disappearance is a lot more than that. It's that she had just come back from a vacation with her fiance. It's that she complained about the people working in the apartment complex. It's that, the status of her apartment when her family showed up, on and on and on. It's that how the Orlando police originally handle it. It's not any one particular thing. So when we start looking at all these other disappearances and why they haven't risen to the prominence of Mara Murray's and these others that I noted, maybe they just don't have enough of that stuff. I mean, certainly, like I said, we've certainly covered disappearances that are stranger or more harder to understand than Mara Murray's. Many, 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 but still those ones aren't well as known as Mara. So it takes more than that. It's a lot of things put together. So I think that's where I am here over 8 years into doing the podcast. What do all of you think? D says you've pulled some muscles, tendons, right shoulder. Oh, I know. That's not. How did you do that, D? Rockford says about Jim Plunkett, too many injuries, and he threw more picks than TDs. Wow. Yeah, that's not good. Eli Manning is the other one. Oh, right. That's right. He just became eligible this year. Maybe he's another one. Maybe he's going to go in the Jim Plunkett category, Rockford. Big Eli Manning, big game quarterback, but his stats not good. You know, I know that given that he and Ben Roethlisberger and, of course, Phillip Rivers all got drafted that same year, so Ben and Eli kind of get put in the, the same thing being, same category being that they both won 2 Super Bowls. But you look at their stats, and it's not really even close. I mean, Eli Manning was on some bad teams, whereas Ben Roethlisberger never had a losing season. And then he ended up being like 5th in yardage, and he's the only quarterback to have 4 games throwing for over 500 yards and everything. So in the Super Bowl category, they're the same. But in everything else, Ben, greatly bypasses Eli. So you might be right, Rockford. Maybe Eli ends up in the Jim Plunkett category. Cranky says, reading the book College Girl Missing, the IU student Laura Spear case. So yeah, right, 2011. I'm familiar with it. They said in the book, the media chase her case based on attractiveness and family wealth. That could be, Cranky. I know the generalities. She was with some guy, and he said he dropped her off at the dorm. Well, this is a man said type of disappearance. Got to believe that he had something to do with it, I guess. I would have to know a lot more about it. But even, I think a lot of people know Lauren Spears' disappearance. But the way I look at it, I don't know if it's well known as Mara Murray's or Jennifer Kessie's or Brian Schaefer's, but certainly more well known than many. Do you fell way back in November and your shoulder still hurts in February? Yeah, you might want to get that looked at. Maybe, I don't know what your health insurance and everything status is. None of my business, D. But if your shoulder's still bothering you, like almost 3 months later, you might want to do something about that. Rockford, I agree on the multi-factors being the reason Schaefer, Murray, Cassie are so popular. It's hard to simplify the cases with so many odd clues, some of which are just noise, but maybe not all. Okay. Yeah, Rockford. And Rockford, where have you been for the think tanks? We've missed you. We're doing one tomorrow night. We didn't do it last night, Rockford. Tomorrow night, I hope I'll see you there. Hello, DD. What's going on, Wonder Woman? All right, so you did get it looked at, D, but you're still hurting. Wow. Okay, sorry to hear that. Maybe you need surgery or something. Moving on. The Steve Panky letter. Let's just get to that now, being that that's on the list. But I now see it. It's sitting under one of my lights. So hold on a moment. Okay. What do I want to? What can I read from this? Well, first of all, here's something. Once again, whether you, I'm not here to check this. I'm not here to go to Colorado and check this for myself. But as you know, I've been going through the discovery material that was sent to me and getting closer and closer to the end of it, by the way. And in one of the reports, it says that the police were able to determine that the size of the shoe print, and I this was put in the video that I did last week or the week before, that the shoe prints in the snow outside the Matthews house were a size 11 shoe, as best as they could tell. We know that's not an exact science, especially if it's snow, but that's it's right there in the paperwork, and I saw it. That wasn't like somebody just, well, I think or something. It sounds like they measured it, and that's what they said. And to also remind all of you, the police sent letters out. Of course, this is 1980-45. Sent letters out to many shoe manufacturers. So if you can name a major shoe manufacturer of the mid 80s, they sent a letter to that company, just so you know. And with like looking for the pattern, what kind of shoe is this? Who makes the shoe? They never did figure out who made the shoe. The pattern that was in the snow did not match any pattern from any of these companies, just so you know. But still, they could determine what the size of the shoe was, and they said it was a size 11. I asked Steve, what size shoe does he wear? And in the letter right here, it's the first thing he answered. He says he wears a size 10. Now, we know with shoe sizes, we know how close, they can be. I mean, unless you have feet like Shaquille O'Neal, pretty much, the average guy's feet, even if, from far away, looking at a size 11 foot and a size 9 foot, they look the same. It's not till you start putting on shoes that the size the difference in size starts to be noticeable. So, and we also have to remember that sizes in shoes vary. That you could wear a size 9 in a Nike, but wear a size 8.5 or 9.5 in a New Balance shoe. Or wear a 9.5 in a New Balance shoe, but wear a 10 in a Skechers shoe. This is what makes this a little bit difficult. But for the record, in the paperwork, it says that the shoe print was a size 11, and Steve tells me that he wears a size 10 shoe. Once again, I'm not there to check that for myself, but I have to believe, here's what I think I know. Being this didn't come up in the trial, that they never asked Steve his shoe size. And funny enough, I don't think his defense lawyers ever did that either. It leads me to believe that Steve's telling the truth. So this is something that I guess needs to be reconciled. If it really is a size 11 and he says a size 10 foot, what are we talking about here? Now, it very well could be if he did this, maybe he went out there with shoes that were bigger in his feet to kind of, throw, investigators off, I guess. But man, that sounds a little too complicated to me. Maybe not to you. So if you're wondering about that, that is what Steve says. Also, he obviously has seen somehow the presentation that came out last year on the Oxygen Network, the production that I was in. And he did write this. You did me a huge justice. You did me and justice a huge favor by stating there was not enough evidence to convict me in the Oxygen episode. I hope you would point out to your audience showing there was not enough evidence to convict me. I'm hoping other podcasters would pick up the discovery and I don't know what he's saying here. Pick up the discovery and report the same. All right. So I'm hoping other podcasters would pick up on the stuff that was said by me in the Discovery Show and report the same. I really don't know how many, I don't know. I mean, at this point now, if anybody else, I realized that when the trials happened or when he got charged or when Janelle Matthews was found back in 2019, there was certainly a multitude of true crime podcasts and YouTube channels that covered it. For example, I think John Lorden on his YouTube channel talked about it, but I don't know if anybody's talking about this now. However, I should tell you, I don't know when it's going to happen, but Julia Cali at the Consult and I have talked about me going on there to talk about the case. No dates, nothing. But it did come up. Came up right around the time that I ended up getting these materials. And like I said, whether I'm really allowed to release these to the public is still something that is, I don't know totally if it's ethical and legal at this point, even though I have them. But we could certainly use them in a situation, because I did send them to Julia because, we talked about doing that. So at least I guess in the Consult, maybe sometime this year, we'll be covering that over there, and we'll get to go over a lot of this stuff in depth. And I am still planning at some point to do a series talking about everything that I've read in the discovery materials, because a lot of it is eye-opening. I'm going to keep saying that. So we'll see. We shall see. But I sent out all those materials over. Of course, it's many, 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 many pages. I've not asked Julia about if she's even gotten into any of it. What's good for her is of course, she's kind of a co-host of that podcast. So maybe each of them can pick out a little piece to do themselves, whereas I have to do this all myself. Otherwise, what else did he say in this? He says, to answer your questions, the police in this case think very black and white and are all answers and no questions. I'm pretty gray in my thinking. I have a Jehovah's Witness view that requires a high standard. And what I did was I asked him about the Matthews house, and if he, in him thinking about the crime once again, if he didn't do, of course, maybe if he didn't, he's still thinking about it as well. But if he didn't do it, has he ever sat down and tried to think about, how this all actually happened? Kind of what I did on this video that I did a couple weeks ago. Looking at the evidence, the footprints and everything else, how exactly did everything happen that night? Because as I've stated, if you only think about for 30 seconds, it seems very straightforward. If you think about it for 5 minutes, then inconsistencies and little problems and, things that are hard to explain start to pop up. So I asked him about that, and he says, I have no opinion about the Matthews house, the garage door, the jewelry box. I asked him about all of this. He also has no opinion on some people that are mentioned in the report that I'm not going to mention right now, except for Norris Drake, because his name's out there. He says, I don't know why Jim Matthews failed a polygraph. That's public knowledge as well. And he also said, and this is something that I don't know if I mentioned this when it happened or when I found out about it. And Steve said he also had no knowledge about Jim Matthews' parents dying. If you don't know this, like I said, I've known this for a little while now. And I forget if I mentioned this on the live show when it happened. It was within the last couple months. What happened was that somehow I found out recently that Jim Matthews' parents died on a cruise ship off the coast of California. And it seems they jumped. It seems. No proof of that. But this cruise ship, where it left from in California, I posted the story in the discussion group on Facebook. But it seems that they both somehow went missing from that cruise ship. And so I asked Steve if he knew about this. Then this happened like 2011, something like that. I asked Steve if he knew about that, like you just heard. He said he did not know about that. So if we're to believe him, I guess what this means is if he killed Janelle Matthews, he seemingly was not keeping tabs on the Matthews family at all. And Steve goes on to say, my only observation regarding the Matthews house is, did Janelle really make it home that evening? All right. So Steve, I know some of you think that he killed Janelle. Fine by me. But I think what we're also saying is that if he didn't, it seems he's suspicious of Russ Ross. Did it really go down that? Of course, Russ Ross and his daughter claim, yeah, they jumped Janelle off. Whereas Steve's saying, did she really make it home that night at all? And did the substitute teacher talk to Janelle? Remember, the substitute teacher called in because she was sick, wasn't going to be able to make it that day. The next day, Janelle picked up the phone, or a girl picked up the phone, and what this woman said later is that she was surprised to learn that Janelle Matthews was 12 years old, because the girl that she talked to on the phone sounded like she was like 5 years old. And this is what has caused me to think, was Janelle really the one who answered that phone? Or was it somebody with like a fake voice or something? I don't know. And in that one crucial hour, why did 12-year-old Janelle sound like a 6-year-old? There you go, to the substitute. So those are some of the things that he said in this letter that I got before last Monday's live show, and I've finally had a chance to read it. Let me see what's everybody saying. Marty's here. Marty gets in just before the 10 o'clock hour. Good to see you, Marty. You have been missed in the think tank as well. I hope I will see you tomorrow night. I hope I'll see you and Rockford there tomorrow night. We're going to do things on 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Of course, we didn't have the think tank last night because of the Super Bowl. That's pretty messed up, Marty says, about the Steve Pankey letter. Yeah, well, Steve's pretty messed up. So maybe that shouldn't be a surprise. All right, so let's move on to this plane crash. Has not gotten the amount of attention that the one in DC has. It has not gotten as much attention as the one in Philadelphia has. But there was a plane crash in Alaska a few days ago, and 10 people, everybody on this plane, got killed. And it was a propeller plane, and it's like a little airline outfit that flies people back and forth between some of the cities there in Alaska. And this one particular route takes them out over the water. And something happened. And of course, that area of the off the coast of Alaska is frozen right now. And so the plane went down. It crashed into the ice, and everybody got killed. Now, what do you need to know about this type of crash? Of course, it's still out. The NTSB is going to look at it, and their report will not come out for a while. But the good news is that this plane would have had black boxes, being that, of course, technically they're orange, but being that this was a company that hauled passengers, and the requirement is that you have to have a cockpit voice recorder and a flight recorder, in contrast to somebody who just owns, their own private little Cessna. If you're just out there flying yourself around, there's no requirement that you have a cockpit voice recorder or a black box on board. It's not required. But for these kind of operations, when you're flying passengers, there is. What you need to know is that this is some of the toughest flying that can be done anywhere. In that, you have to, the thing about propeller planes of this type is that they have to fly at an altitude that jets can't avoid. If you get on a regular passenger jet and you're flying across the United States, you're up there at like 35,000, 38,000, maybe 40,000 feet. You're way over the clouds. You're way over the weather. You can look down on the clouds. It doesn't matter. There could be a hurricane below or a snowstorm or tornadoes and everything else, but you're up there at 35,000 feet. You got no worries. Now, when you have to come into land, of course, what's the weather like at the airport? Then that might be an issue. But up at cruising altitude, you got nothing to worry about. And this is why very, very few crashes or accidents happen. Most of it's taking off and landing. But with these propeller planes, they can't fly that high. And so a lot of times they are flying in meteorological conditions. They're flying in the clouds. They're flying in the rain the whole trip. Whereas a jet, you may fly the whole way across the United States, and even if it's raining at the airport you took off from and where you're landing, the jet is going to only be flying in the rain for like 15 minutes when you take off, when you land. Whereas with these propeller planes, they're going to be in the rain or whatever the whole time. So if it's an hour trip, they're in the clouds for the whole time, or they're in the snow for the whole time, and they're in the rain. And they're perfectly capable of doing that. They have all the equipment, but this is still some of the toughest flying that is done out there. And what makes it even more difficult is that a lot of these operations are just one pilot situations. There's only one pilot. So, of course, when you get on a passenger jet, a jet like American Southwest, of course, there's two pilots. So you pilot, co-pilot. So, they can kind of keep their eyes on each other and everything. But you get in one of these situations, there's just one pilot. So if that pilot, for example, has a heart attack, that's not good. But more realistically, what it means is there's nobody. If the pilot messes up, that's it. There's not a backup. I talked about spatial disorientation regarding the crash in Philadelphia last week, that I think that this is probably that's at this point, given the facts, that's the most likely, going to be the most likely result. Well, when you can get spatial disorientation when you're flying in the clouds all the time. And when there's only one pilot, if that happens to just that one pilot, that's that. That's that. Now, what happened here? It's hard to say with this Alaska flight with these 10 people who got killed. It's just hard to say. It very well could be some mechanical issue. Could be. It could be spatial disorientation. That would be very, very easy to understand. You're flying in clouds. You have to look at your instruments the whole time. And, if a pilot looks out the window or something, who knows what can happen. But we also have to consider that icing, even though these planes, it was like the updated version, it was the most recent version of this kind of plane that had a better wing de-icers and everything else, it can still happen. And speaking of Washington, D.C., going back, what was it, 1981 or something like that, There was that plane that took off coincidentally from Reagan National. It had ice on the wings, couldn't get airborne, hit that bridge, went in, and only a couple people survived. It can happen on jets too, but that is so rare anymore. So rare for jets because we have de-icing and we got that down to a science now. But when it's the planes or propeller planes, these planes that only carry like 5, 8, 10, 12 people, and because they have to fly they can't fly any higher than the clouds, and they fly right in that ice the whole time. You can do it, and you get away with it most of the time. And I'm sure a lot of these pilots have flown their entire careers like that, never had any problems. But the risk for something bad happening is way higher than if you're getting on a passenger jet that's going to take off in the snow, but then in 10 minutes is going to be, above all of the clouds, and, the weather is not going to be a factor at all. So when you got a single pilot in cloudy conditions, icy conditions, rainy conditions, flying as a pilot, it just doesn't get any harder than that. And this is one of the reasons I will tell you, you will never see me getting on a propeller plane. Never. I've been on one once, and that was 1996. My girlfriend at the time, her name was Janie, and we took I think I've talked about this trip before on the live show, but we went to the island of St. Martin for like 3 or 4 days. But that morning, to get there, we flew from Pittsburgh to JFK. And this was right after TWA 800 just blew up. And so they were thinking that time might have been, we're thinking it might have been a bomb or a missile. So you can just imagine how security was there. But that would have been August of 96. And we flew a propeller plane from Pittsburgh to JFK. Now, it was no big deal. It was summer. I don't even think it was raining. It was, but that's not a short trip, in a propeller plane. In a jet, it's like an hour. In a propeller plane, I think that was 2 hours or something. It's just not my cup of tea, really. And so we flew this propeller plane. I think it was one of those ATR planes up to JFK, and then took a jet. I think it was a 757 down to St. Martin. Then we came back. And then we once again rode in a propeller plane back to Pittsburgh. And just like I said, it's kind of cool because you're closer to the ground and you can see things better. And it does give you maybe a feeling of like how flying used to be, maybe in the 50s or 40s, because it's a propeller plane. You're a lot closer to the ground and everything. Just give me the jet. Get me up there at 35,000 feet. Let's just get where we're going. But that's the one time I've been on a propeller plane. And even that one had 2 propellers, and it's fairly sophisticated plane. But still. Stephanie asks, was this the same trip that you got stranded on the island? It was, Stephanie. Man, you have a good memory. That was the trip where she and I got stranded on a deserted island. And if some of you don't know that story, I'm not telling it tonight. So I don't, like I said, I just don't have enough facts to really able to say what the most likely theory is for this Alaska crash. You just have to understand that if you're getting on a plane like that, and the conditions are less than pristine, and it's just one pilot, it's tough. It's tough. It's very, very taxing because remember, with just one pilot, he or she has to do everything. Has to do the navigating, has to do the communicating on the radio, has to do the flying, has to do all the checklists and everything else. It's tough. Marty says, classic Ed story. Oh, the stranded on the desert. That's my favorite. Well, that's my favorite story that I can tell publicly. Yes. Who would have thunk it? Who would have thunk it? I just turned 26 years old. Seems like yesterday. I'm over twice that old now. It's really, really bad. Moving on. Remember, I know some of you remember. Remember my volunteer Natasha? She really doesn't volunteer for me anymore. She's moved on to some other things, but I do keep in contact with her. I like Natasha a lot. She got back in contact with me recently, and she has a job where she works at night. And she asked me if she could start contacting schools again for me. And that's something I kind of gotten away from, especially since what's been going on with me sleep-wise for the last 2.5 months. But she's going to start doing that again. And I'm going to be more open to the idea of beaming in to schools with Zoom or whatever. So we're going to get that back up and running again. So I'm excited. It just kind of came out of the blue. I was like, hey, Natasha. And she brought it up. I was like, I think that's a spectacular idea, Natasha, because you have to remember something. The reason that Dr. Telesco and I even know each other is because of Natasha. Natasha was the one who originally contacted Nova Southeastern University. It was Dr. Telesco who got back to her. So if you're ever wondering about how that happened, and that's going to be like 5 years ago, that is how it happened. That was through Natasha. So we'll get that back up and running, get to some new schools, and if they're kind of close, I'll drive to them. If I'm, once again, this all is dependent on how I'm feeling. And if not, we'll just do it over Zoom. If some of these schools, these criminal justice programs are interested. And we'll be, of course, looking at schools outside of outside of Florida, which means I'm not going to drive to those ones. All right, moving on. There is some Jodi Huisentruit news, and this was just posted. I'm on their email list, and so I got this today or yesterday. So I'll read it to you. Jodi Huisentruit. As expected, Cerro Gordo County Attorney Carlisle Dalen, what a name, has filed a motion asking a judge to keep sealed a 2017 search warrant in the Jodi Huisentruit investigation. The warrant concerns GPS data related to 2 vehicles connected to John Van Cise. And I still haven't figured out, is he actually deceased or not? Of course, I announced that, a couple months ago? And then Caroline Lowe contacted me, and we had a conversation about it. Is he deceased? Is he not deceased? Has anybody seen an obituary? So there's still, I need to resolve that. I need to put that on my list of things to do. But I don't know how many of you remember, but not long ago, within the last 10 years, of course, we have to remember she went missing in 1995, but they put trackers on John Van Cise's vehicles at some point when he still lived in Iowa. And they collected that data. Well, as you can imagine, a lot of people have been trying to get their hands on that data, whatever they said, including the people at findjodi.com, and they've been unsuccessful, of course, because those records are sealed. And the thing about it is, I guess every so many years or every year or something, it comes back up that if they don't continue for the warrant to be sealed, then it'll become public. So that's why this is coming up. I'll read it again. Carlisle Dalen has filed a motion asking a judge to keep sealed a 2017 search warrant in the Jodi Huisentruit investigation. The warrant concerns GPS data related to 2 vehicles connected to John Van Cise. Now, what were they hoping to get? Maybe they're thinking he's going to drive somewhere where her remains might be, it seems like a stretch to me. Even if John Van Cise killed Jodi back in 1995, and there are people who believe that, I don't personally believe that, but I'm not so closed off to think that he couldn't have done it. I just don't think it's very likely. I don't know what they're looking to get, 20 some years. Is he really going to go somewhere to wherever he put Jodi if he's the one who did it? It seems so unlikely. So why are they keeping it sealed? I don't know. Maybe they think that the data does say something. Here's what I know. If the data said something, they surely went and checked out wherever John Van Cise went, if he did go anywhere. And of course, we know Jodi's still missing. So I don't know what to make of it. Unfortunately, after 8 years of doing the podcast, I start thinking, are they just sealing this stuff up just to seal it? Just because they can? Because so many people want to see the information, that's the reason they don't want to show the people. Whether it's findjodi.com or me or anybody else, because we want to see it so badly, that's the reason they're not releasing it, as if to spite us or something. I have to admit, I'm open to that. That's what I think I've learned about police and DAs doing this for 8.5 years. So in 2018, Mason City Police Chief Jeff Brinkley told 48 Hours correspondent Jim Axelrod, he says, we didn't get any information that was useful. Then why don't you release it? Maybe it shows, I don't know. Did it show that John Van Cise was cheating on his wife or something? I don't know. In a motion filed on Thursday, Dalen said the state is conducting an ongoing investigation of the incident. The death of a person of interest, John Van Cise, has not stopped or altered the investigation. So there we have it. I guess John Van Cise is deceased. The state's ongoing investigation would be severely compromised if the documents are not sealed. These documents contain information concerning essential facts in this investigation, and the investigation will be substantially compromised if information contained in the search warrant is prematurely released to the public. I don't believe a word of that. The public and the press have a right to immediate access to documents filed in court based upon both common law and the First Amendment. However, that right to public access is not an absolute right. It is rather a qualified right. All right. And Dalen argues Iowa Code Chapter 22.7 doesn't just protect the rights of the person being investigated, it protects the integrity of the investigation. The records contained in the search warrant are the exact type of confidential records the statute was trying to protect during an ongoing investigation. Since 2017, judicial magistrates by court order have yearly reviewed and reapproved the state's request to seal the search warrant and related documents. Death of a person of interest does not change any of the compelling government reasons for sealing the search warrant and related documents. As Find Jodi previously reported, two Iowa attorneys argued in a motion that the warrant should be opened since Van Cise passed away in December 2024, and as such, any ongoing investigation into his involvement in this matter has now ceased. Attorneys Nellie O'Mara and Jesse Marzin also said the state has no right to conduct an investigation after a person is deceased. And also in this article, Iowa private investigator Steve Ridge later released a statement to the news media that the attorneys were representing him. Ridge said Van Cise died in December, prompting him to seek a court ruling. I think it is time to lift the cloud of suspicion that has hung over Van Cise and his family for many years. Steve Ridge is the guy who I don't think he knows any more about this disappearance than anybody else. He's been interviewed by national news organizations regarding Jodi's disappearance. He's not even part of the findjodi.com crew. And he says, well, I haven't narrowed down to 4 people who could have done it and everything. Well, everybody has it narrowed down to 4. The problem is it doesn't have to be any of those 4. And in fact, I have to tell you, my opinion on this is that my opinion is still whoever caused Jodi's disappearance, I don't think that name has been released, named anywhere, because I really don't believe anybody knows who it is. I think this is very much like, the original Night Stalker, that they investigated all these people, all these names were thrown around, all these ideas were thrown around. And the fact is, the guy who ended up being the original Night Stalker was never suspected, was never interviewed, nothing. So we have to keep that in mind. It's now up to the Cerro Gordo County Magistrate to decide if the sealed search warrant should remain sealed. Anyone with information on Jodi's case should contact the Mason City Police Department at 641-421-3636 or email Iowa DCI Special Agent Ryan Herman at rherman@dps.state.ia.us. And you can always reach out to findjodi.com. It's one of those. I have to believe. 54. Maybe I make it into my 80s. Let's say I have maybe not quite 30 years left on this earth. Let's hope. Jodi's is still a disappearance where I think it can be solved. And if I live another 30 years, that it will be solved before I leave this earth. Because the reason I think that is because there was obviously a crime committed. There was enough evidence to know this isn't like so many disappearances that we feature where there's like no signs of a struggle, no signs of violence, no forensics. They had all that stuff for Jodi's. It's rare, but we have it. And I think the profile of the person who did this, a guy, of course, most likely, is somebody who is probably still alive. And this happened 30 years ago. We're coming up on the 30-year anniversary. Well, all that means is if the guy was 30 in 1995, he's only 60 now. He's turning 60 this year. So I think as long as you have it in your mind that the person who did this is still alive, I think there's always going to be a chance that something good can happen. Hey, a person, loose lips think ships can happen at any time. Just because a person is quiet about it for 30 years doesn't mean that person is going to be quiet about it for 31 years. Or that there isn't going to be somebody new that comes into that person's life who, knows about Jodi's disappearance, maybe more than the average person, and hears the person say something, the person does something, and it just, a light bulb goes off. So I have to admit that I still think this is one that in the next 30 years that it could be solved. It's going to take a little doing, but not as much doing as maybe some of the other disappearances that we featured where, at least for me, I don't see a clear path for those particular disappearances to get solved. I think also what is important here is that this was done by a person who was obsessed with Jodi, meaning there's always the chance that this person becomes obsessed with somebody else. Not that I'm hoping that that person goes missing too, but what you have to hope for, even if it's 30 years later, that this person at least tries to do this again. What's also noteworthy about this is that, Jodi's disappearance is rare. It is. We have a lot of reporters in the United States, and they live just in regular houses and apartments like the rest of us. And it's very easy for mainly men. Of course, there's women stalkers too. I mean, there have been plenty of, yeah, I don't want to get into sexuality of it. It happens to all lesbians, gay men, whoever. But just to break it down this way, there have been a lot of famous actors who have come home to find women, in their houses. That happens. I can even think of a time like with Keanu Reeves where that happened. Still, we have to realize that Jodi seemingly is the only reporter who's ever been attacked and kidnapped from outside of her place, at least in the United States. Whereas we know there's a lot of obsessing that goes on out there. And we know that there is a lot of stalking that goes out there. But she is the only reporter who's actually been taken, which could maybe lead us to believe this didn't have anything to do with her reporting. I believe it did. But given that we have no disappearances like hers, this could lead us to believe that her getting snatched had nothing to do with her being a reporter. Something to think about. Rockford, I don't find the Van Cise angle promising, but I'll keep an open mind. Speaking of news, Kelly got some financial info on Schaefer's account that may be worth a look, but I'm not sure it amounts to much. I don't know if she told me about that or not, Rockford. Back to Jodi. I'll bet it's a name and a foul, but perhaps one that isn't a strong suspect. I still can't shake my feeling about TJ. And Marty says, I agree. The guy is probably still alive. I think that makes a lot of sense because what I think I know about Jodi's disappearance, this was not done by some 50-year-old. Given the physicalness of it and the stalking aspect of it and the patience of and everything, this was done by a younger guy. And I would say 35 years old at the oldest. So there's a very good chance that he is still out there. And as long as he's still out there, mistakes can be made. That's what I would say about that. Let's move on to this. This is the other one of the other topics. Let's go to this. No, Charlotte. I don't even know if Charlotte is in the chat. Kind of going off topic. She asked me a question about autotune. Now, if you don't know what autotune is, this is a technology that you use in music these days when recording singers. That instead of waiting for the singer to get the line, the chorus, or whatever else absolutely correct, what they can do is they'll record it, and there's this thing called autotune that will automatically put the song into the right pitch if the singer isn't quite getting it done. If the singer's going a little flat, a little sharp, just can't get it done, they can just run it through a computer and it will all come out just fine. And this is, of course, this is mainly, this is a technology that's been around for a while. But I will admit, the music that I listen to, they don't do that because this technology didn't even exist, given the music that I listen to. As you know, mainly I listen to music from the 70s and 80s, and sometimes a little into the 90s with Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and stuff, but mainly 70s, 80s when this technology didn't exist. The singer, one way or another, had to eventually get it, and then keep recording it over and over until the pitch and everything was correct. So Charlotte asked me about that, and I really don't know. Let me see if I can. Where is the exact question that she brought up? Where is it? Hold on just a moment, please. She tagged me in the comment, and now I can't find it. But it had to do with autotune. What do I think about it? It's used. And in fact, it's gotten to the point where it's become actually kind of part of the creative process, because in using this technology, you can do a lot of things with a singer's voice that the singer actually isn't doing in the recording studio. You can do a lot of funky stuff with, so it's like a synthesizer for your voice. I like talent. It's the very reason that I started taking singing lessons, and although I got away from them, given what's been going on with me the last couple months, I'm back to singing every day, and I really haven't lost too much. So that makes me happy, but and it's not easy to do because I'm tired. Even if I get 6 hours of sleep like I did last night, I still end up getting tired. I get the sleepies in the afternoon. I'm still sleep deprived, and I'm not going to get all of my sleep back until I start sleeping longer at night. But I've been doing it. I like talent. I like the singers who can actually sing all the notes and sing in the keys, and it's even better if they can do it live when I go see them in concert. Now, of course, a lot of the concerts I'm going to these days, all of the musicians, they're not youngsters anymore. And so, and in singing, of course, you're playing guitar and everything. You could probably play the guitar in your 60s just as well as you did in your 30s. But when it comes to the human voice, when your musical instrument is a body part, well, that's a lot tougher. But still, some singers can still do it. Some can't. Some have lowered the bands have lowered the key, like by a step or a step and a half, so the notes are easier to hit, because a lot of the music that I listen to, there are men who are being asked to sing a lot of high notes that they could hit back in their 20s and 30s, but now in their 60s, it's a lot tougher. And it maybe has to do with maybe the way they've lived their lives. Maybe they haven't taken care of their voices and everything. But I like talent. People who actually put in the time doing all of that work, taking care of their voices, being patient with it, doing their exercises, learning the right technique, and learning how to stay in pitch and everything else. That's what I like. That's part of, that's the era in which I grew up. Whereas I'm not sure a 25-year-old that's into Kendrick Lamar and everybody else, I'm not sure the people who are 30 years younger than I am care about that. And I'm sure there's some, maybe we could even, if I want to compare it to my era to the eras before me, there are still people believe that records are better than CDs. Now, of course, audio CDs came out in the 80s. But I'm sure at the time, of course, I would have been a teenager when CDs, the first CD I ever got was Van Halen 5150, which is funny because I really don't care for the Hagar era of Van Halen. But I'm sure there were people in their 40s and 50s in the mid 1980s when CDs started coming out. They were saying, records are much better, and Frank Sinatra sounds a lot better on records than he does on CDs. And so here I am. I'm now those people. And I don't, so maybe I'm sounding like one of them. I'm just telling you that I like talent. When it's Bruce Dickinson or Don Dokken from the group Dokken, or Jeff Tate from Queensryche, or Steve Perry from Journey, and they're singing, and that they could really sing those notes and they can still be in pitch and everything else, that's what I like. Autotune, makes it easier for the singer. Maybe it saves their voices in the recording process. But what I think I also know is, given human nature, that if you already know that there's a technology out there that if you don't sing something correctly, that it'll fix it, that only is going to cause you maybe to not care about how you sing it. It's my attitude. Hello, Jill. Lisa says hi to Marty. Max says there's a reason Post Malone uses autotune. Yeah. I know who he is, Mac. I know him from that commercial. I don't think I've ever heard any of his music, ever. Maybe I haven't. I just didn't know it was him, or it was he, to use correct English. I just couldn't be less interested. The good thing for me when it comes to music is the bands that I like are still putting out new music. Not Van Halen. Iron Maiden just released an album a couple years ago called Senjutsu. It came out like right around COVID or a little bit after COVID. Senjutsu, fantastic album. Def Leppard has come out with a new album. Kip Winger has come out with a new album. Judas Priest has come out with a new album. And they all sound fantastic. Megadeth, new album within the last few years. So I'm glad these guys are still around. They're making new music. And granted, most of the music I listen from the bands that I like are, from 30, 40 years ago. But that they're putting out new music, that means I don't have to listen to any new music. There's new stuff coming down the line. And it's pretty good. And many of these bands have kept in shape. Some of them haven't. Bruce Dickinson, bizarrely, I would say that from a technique point of view, maybe he's lost a little bit of his range, but he sings better than he did in the 80s. If you can believe it, if you listen to it. Rob Halford from Judas Priest, he can still squeal with the best of them. And he's in his 70s. Whereas on the other hand, Jeff Keith from Tesla, they've had to lower the song, being that I saw them last year. They've had to detune the songs a little bit, a step and a half. But on the other hand, he was never a guy who had great technique. He was kind of a screecher. If you're learning to sing, I don't know if anybody really wants to sound like Jeff Keith from Tesla, even though Tesla's a fantastic band. Love them. And I like his voice. I don't know if I really want to sound like him, though. Kip Winger. I saw him live back 6 months ago. Still got it. So that's me. I'm not an autotune guy, but it's more a reflection of what I listen to and my age. Talk to somebody 30 years younger than I am, they probably don't give a dang. D says, well, they say Jelly Roll uses it. Yeah, I think everybody uses it these days. Maybe even Beyonce, who, of course, she has a great voice. She's been around for a while with Destiny's Child, and I don't think they were using autotune. I don't know if that even existed back then. She can sing. Is she probably using it for the recordings that she does these days, that country album and everything? Probably. Rockford, Neil Young would enjoy giving a long lecture on sound quality. My all-time favorite solo artist, but see snippy about this topic. Yeah, I have to admit, I'm not a big Neil Young fan. Yeah, autotune, D. Rockford, not my favorite band or my favorite genre, but how on earth does Randy Blythe, Lamb of God, keep up what he does? Once again, I realize they're a metal band. I'm not into new metal, like NU metal. It all sounds the same to me. So I couldn't, gotta be honest, Rockford, I don't think I could pick anybody out of a lineup of Lamb of God, and I probably couldn't pick any of their songs out either. I'm not a new metal, like if you don't know, new as in NU, that's the genre. I'm not really into it. I guess I just like what I like, and that the music that I listen to takes me back to being 17 all over again. All right, let's talk about this this group in Ohio. Governor Mike DeWine, Missing Persons Working Group, is already beginning to develop potential recommendations to improve how law enforcement searches for missing Ohioans. At its second meeting Thursday, so just 4 days ago, members of the group pitched everything from asking all law enforcement agencies to have a missing persons point person to establishing a network of advocates and creating a team of state liaisons and analysts to drill down on reports and data. Final recommendations will be made at the end of April. As part of this work, we have got to capture all of that. Andy Wilson, chairman of the group and director of the Ohio Department of Safety, said of the ideas, these are more than just resources. Members of the group, which DeWine created in response to the Dispatch's Vanished investigation last November, includes police from around Ohio, advocates and family of missing Ohioans. Together, the group's 25 members also discussed the need to set statewide standards for missing persons investigations, digitized files for cold cases, the possibility of advanced training for new detectives, and what legislative changes could be made. That's funny, the possibility of advanced training for new detectives. How about basic training for old detectives? How about that? Kevin Callahan, detective with the Cleveland Division of Police, told the group that he is working with a state senator, Tom Patton, on a bill that could allow law enforcement to get a warrant for cell phone records of a missing person, even when it's not obvious whether a crime has been committed. Ideally, the bill would set a uniform definition for who is considered an endangered missing person. Police would then be able to file for a warrant for phone records for vanished Ohioans who meet their endangered criteria. In its Vanished investigation that published in November, the Dispatch found the age cutoff for a missing child considered high risk differs throughout the state. In Columbus, it's 10. In Akron, Toledo, it's 13 and under. And in Cleveland and Dayton, it's 14. The problem is everyone's got a different definition of what endangered is. But if we can articulate it as detectives based on this bill, then that is going to be a huge thing for us. Another area the group focused on Thursday was how to better find children with autism who go missing. Yep. Gallia County Sheriff Matt Chaplin told the working group that he encourages parents of kids with autism to submit a form online to let his office know their children has the spectrum disorder in the event they go missing. Parents can provide a photo of their autistic child along with any other important information about him or her. The idea has been so successful that the Gallia County Sheriff's Office has actually started using it for people with other developmental disabilities and mental illnesses. If you know Gallia County, we're pretty simple down here. Not a lot of resources, but it's seemed work pretty well for us. Dayton Police Chief Cameron Avzal said he'd like to see a program similar to the Gallia County Sheriff's idea set up at the state level. Wilson also praised the program and said it was a good community-based solution. Likely wouldn't be a workload burden on police. Figuring out better ways to share more information are key to providing investigations and outcomes. That information is power, man, Wilson said. When I've seen cases go south or go bad, a lot of times there wasn't a lot of information on the front end that those responding officers had. Well, that is certainly true. These guys aren't new metal, very hardcore, think Sailor, but more. Yeah, I'm not into Slayer either, Rockford. Yeah. I go to like Iron Maiden, Megadeth. The problem I have with Slayer is I actually prefer singing. Even Dave Mustaine is singing, even though he's keeping it in the normal range. But any group where the singer starts shouting and growling and anything like that, I'm out. I'm just out. Very hardcore. Think Slayer, but more, and so that's what I think of. I can't do it. I like a little more of a groove. Even Dave Mustaine will tell you that Megadeth is actually a jazz band, which is funny. So you should know something about this group that I just read about. I actually requested to be part of this group and they rejected me. You should know that. Now, granted, I didn't ask to be part of the group until I found out that the group already existed. So they had decided who was going to be in the group. I found out about it. I ended up getting the email of one of the people in the group. And you should know a guest of Unfound is in the group. And so I emailed her. I will tell you who it is in a second. Bear with me for a moment. It was, my goodness. Where is it here? It was Andy Chapman's sister, Amy Chapman. She is in this group, this 25-member group that is now in Ohio. She is in the group. I found out about that. I emailed her. She gave me the email address of one of the officers, law enforcement people in the group. I emailed this person, and the person told me that, well, the group is already set in stone. So they don't want my help. I think they probably need it. Rockford says, Kelly in the group. Lori, I think Lori Davis is Rockford. That's true. I think she is. Kelly is not. You have to remember, Kelly doesn't live in Ohio anymore. And even so, I don't know if she'd be in or not. I don't know. But I think Lori Davis is too, Rockford. But Amy Chapman is the woman that I, know the best. And like I said, she gave me the name of another person who maybe had a little more say about who's in the group and who is not. And they decided this woman decided they didn't want anything to do with me. I'm not saying they were rude about it. I'm not saying that. She wasn't. But what I would also say is, given that I told her a little bit about myself and the experience that I have and everything else, that there wasn't even a discussion, tells me something. The big issue I have is just in reading what is in this article. And of course, there have been many articles written about this group that's come together. And I'm sure all these articles say different things. And I'm sure there's more going on with this group than in this one article and everything. My question continues to be, do the people in this group have enough missing persons experience to make good choices about the changes that need to be made or new things they need to add? Because if you don't have that experience, it's not obvious. It's not obvious. I think that what we've found out about, you actually have to have missing persons experience. And I would say that even though how many of the people in this group have actually tried to go about investigating disappearances that are unsolved that are 20 years and older? How many of them? And how many have they done with that? Because that's, we have to remember something. That's where, to put it in a way, that's where the money is made. It's always easy today. So we're going to change things. And the next disappearance that's going to happen, we're going to do better. And when people say that, I'm inclined to believe them. But that really doesn't help you resolve all of the disappearances that have already happened. And as I have learned myself, both in talking to some, not many, but law enforcement officers over the last 8.5 years, and then reading what law enforcement officers have said publicly about these disappearances, just in general, that are unsolved, that are 20, 30, 40 years old, it's obvious to me they don't have a good handle on this. They're just off. They're just off. And I think that law enforcement is, they're human too. And they're just as likely to get caught up in conspiracy theories and ideas that have no basis in fact as the public is. That's my assessment. And in fact, as a good example of this, this disappearance that got solved within the last couple years, Robert Helfrey, that happened right here in Pinellas County in Clearwater area where I live. This is a disappearance that I wanted to cover from the podcast, but didn't get to it. Although I met the guy's mother. I went up and saw her, I met her in person. He was a guy, this happened like 20 years ago now, that he was out with some friends. He was at work, then went over to a bar, had a couple drinks, was seemingly going to meet a friend of his back at his place, never made it home, never seen again. And you might remember that within the last couple of years, he was found in his car in a retention pond, kind of like Esther Westenberger, in a housing development. It's obvious he was drinking and driving, made a turn, went right into this water and drowned inside his vehicle. This is what I suspected all along. And in fact, I took a couple days 4 years ago before this was solved. I actually went out and drove around trying to kind of get an idea, map out what bodies of water might be the best choices. I don't think that I ended up picking the right body of water they ended up being in, but I gave it a shot. Whereas you can see articles that were written about Robert's disappearance over the years. Of course, it was 20 years before it got solved, so there's a lot of comments out there from law enforcement. You could get the idea that they actually were thinking that there was some sort of foul play, or that he drove off, was out there somewhere. It's crazy. I'm not saying it's not possible, but given what everyone knew about Robert and everybody knowing that he was drinking, is it not most likely, if you're going to Vegas and you were going to bet on one of the theories, wouldn't it be that he was driving somewhere and made a wrong turn and went into a body of water? Because if you've ever been here in Pinellas County, we have a lot of canals. You have to remember that Florida is nothing but a big sandbar. And you fly in here, as you're flying into Tampa, look down and see how many lakes and little ponds and everything right by the roadside that people can drive into. Still, law enforcement was thinking it was foul play or something. This is why, when it comes to this particular group, I don't know. And reading about it, what I understand about it, I don't mean to be negative, but I just don't think that they have enough disappearance knowledge to move the needle. I think it's a great idea. I'm glad they're doing it. But I know this sounds arrogant. They just need somebody like me. I'll say it. Rockford says, probably nu metal fans who heard what you had to say about their genre. I'm not sure. Rockford, probably nu metal fans who heard what you had to say about their genre. I'm not. Is that a complete sentence, Rockford? So you can check that out. Just Google it. Missing persons group that's come together in Ohio. And I don't know if Amy Chapman's going to keep me apprised of, what's going on there, what they're working on or anything. I haven't asked her, and she's not required to do that. Certainly be interested. But really, what I'd like to be, of course, I don't live in Ohio, but still, I think I could certainly add something to the conversation. But I also think that, law enforcement doesn't have a very high opinion of podcasters, true crime podcasters, for a lot of good reasons. But I think if they checked me out, I think that they'd see that I could be very helpful. But as Julia Callie from the Consult said, sometimes law enforcement doesn't like outsiders coming in because they're afraid that the outsiders will see the mistakes. So there's that. That's why he didn't let you in the Ohio group the moment it passed on that comment. Oh, because they heard what I said about nu metal. That's funny, Rockford. Okay. So this Friday, another on hiatus episode. We're going to where the Super Bowl, at least the state, we're going to Louisiana for the disappearance of Rebecca Gary. She disappeared. At least she was discovered to be missing on December 27th of 1988. I'd have been a senior in high school. And this might ring a bell to you because she had a relationship, something going on with the governor of Louisiana at the time. His name was Edwin Edwards. And she went missing from her place. And it seems when and the landlord or somebody showed up, it does seem that she was planning to move back to Shreveport, and she'd pretty much packed up. And all her stuff pretty much was packed up, but she wasn't there. But it also looked like somebody had been in there with her because with her 2 glasses or something like that instead of one. And the other point that comes to mind regarding her disappearance is that she used to have in her possession a manila folder that she took with her everywhere, and she wouldn't let anybody see what was inside of it. When she went missing, that went missing too. So that's what we're doing this Friday on hiatus episode, Rebecca Gary. And this is not this will give us an opportunity to discuss that in her disappearance in the think tank Sunday. Of course, we're going to do a think tank tomorrow night because we didn't do it last night regarding Jeff Nichols. That's all I have for all of you tonight. I hope you all gave this show a thumbs up tonight. Please consider subscribing to this channel or joining as a member, as Frida did at the beginning of the night. Go to patreon.com/Unfound podcast. And that's about it. I'll keep telling you, I hope to be able to get back to new episodes soon, but I have to make sure that physically and mentally, I don't want to get into a situation where I start doing new episodes again and I have a relapse or something, and then that I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that when I start doing them, that I can continue to do them, week after week after week. That's the commitment I make to all of you and to myself. So thank you so much. Keep your heads on swivels out there. Do not be victims. Charlie, say hi to the kids for me. Good night.